So we'll say, in general, one of the difficulties that we encounter on Yom Yerushalayim for many of us, similar to one of the difficulties we encounter on Yom Ha'atzmaut, we'll say, is the idea of appreciating something that you've never lived without. So Yom Yerushalayim is a little bit different, right? Because Yom Yerushalayim is much more contemporary for many, right? So many know a world in which Klal Yisrael did not have shlita, did not have control over the holy city of Yerushalayim. So we'll say, what is it exactly that we're celebrating? So obviously on the most basic level, we're celebrating the fact that Baruch Hashem in 1967, right, 57 years ago, we were Zoche Baruch Hashem to reclaim Jewish ownership over Yerushalayim. To be able, as we said before, to say the words Harabayas Biadenu, right? That literally, again, the Temple Mount, and even to recognize today, that as much as it is not yet our Beis HaMikdash that stands on the site, the holy site on the Harabayis, but nevertheless, there's Jewish autonomy over that site, right? There's a Jewish army that patrols that site. And at the end of the day, it is Mamish Biadenu, it is within our hands. But on a deeper level, what it comes down to in Yerushalayim is something I think much more profound. There's a beautiful Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. The Mishnah says this is in Parakeh Mishnah Hey. Parakeh Mishnah Hey. So the Mishnah says, Asara Nisim Nasu Lavosenu Beis HaMikdash. There were 10 miracles that happened to our forefathers in the Beis HaMikdash. And again, the Mishnah goes through a whole list. The last of the miracles was, V'lo Amar Adam Tzarli Hamakom Sha'alin B'Yerushalayim. This is beautiful. A person never said that there's not enough space for me to stay in Yerushalayim. Okay? So again, the Pashas Rabbeinu Yonah, Rashi, Bartanur explained that what's referring to is during the Regalim, right? Because think about this just a moment. Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot, everyone is converging on Yerushalayim. So how do you fit the entire population of Klal Yisrael into a city? Into one city. So the Mishnah seems to indicate that halacha l'maisa, there was a miracle that a person never said. No one ever said, there's no place for me to sleep, there's no place for me to be. There was a miracle that Yerushalayim somehow had space for everyone. What's beautiful about this, so again, you could look at this as a miraculous idea, and this almost fits in line, it almost seems to be connected to the miracle that in the Beis HaMikdash, Omdim Sefufim, people would stand packed shoulder to shoulder, Umishtachavim Revachim. When they prostrated themselves, there was space for everyone to prostrate. So it sounds like what the Mishnah is saying is the same way that somehow in the Beis HaMikdash, there was an expansion of geographic area, somehow on a miraculous level to allow bowing down. So too in Yerushalayim, somehow, the city itself expanded to be able to go ahead and accommodate everyone. The Chassam Sofer says something amazing. The Chassam Sofer says, no, there wasn't a miracle. He says Yerushalayim was jam-packed. It was jam-packed. So what does the Mishnah say? V'lo amar Adam tzarli hamakom. No one ever complained. No one ever complained that there was too much traffic in Yerushalayim. No one ever complained that it's too crowded by the Beis HaMikdash. No one ever, again, was it crowded? Absolutely. Were there traffic jams? Absolutely. Did you have to wait online in every single place? Unequivocally, yes. V'lo amar Adam tzarli hamakom. No one ever complained about this dynamic. So what's the pshat? Jews not complaining, right? Jews not complaining, especially on our side. We complain even when it's not legitimate, right? Alachas kama v'kama when it is legitimate. How could it? What's the pshat? What's the pshat? Right? There's traffic anywhere else. There's congestion anywhere else. There's too packed anywhere else. I'm going to complain. But in Yerushalayim, no one complains. There's a beautiful medrash. The medrash says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu went ahead and created Adam Arishon from afar, from dirt. So the Medrash says, where was the afar taken from? Where was the dirt gathered from? And the Medrash says the dirt that created Adam was created ultimately again from Yerushalayim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu took dirt from Yerushalayim and created Adam Arishon. There's two versions of the Medrash. One version of the Medrash just says Yerushalayim. The other version of the Medrash says from Harabayis. Harabayis took the dirt to create Adam Arishon from Yerushalayim. So we'll say, what does that tell you? What that tells you is that Yerushalayim is the source of everything, right? Humanity, it's not just Jewish people, right? It's not just Klal Yisrael. Humanity as a whole sources itself from Yerushalayim Ir HaKodesh. Life comes from Yerushalayim Ir HaKodesh. I was saying, You know that feeling when you come into Yerushalayim? You know, if you're driving into Yerushalayim and you see that big sign, Bruchim Habayim Yerushalayim, right? You come into, what's the feeling that sweeps over you? What's the feeling? It's a feeling of tranquility, right? Why? What's the tranquility, right? Because there's going to be snarling traffic, right? And there's going to be all this stuff, and there's going to be crazy. So what's the tranquility? It's the tranquility of coming back to the source. When you come back to the source of something, it's kind of like, when you're an adult and you go home, right? Maybe you get to visit your parents and you go home, there's a certain tranquility of walking into the home in which you grew up in. There's a certain tranquility about going back to your source. When a Jew goes back to Yerushalayim, Yirah Kodesh, I'm going back to the source. Now let's say this is why a person davens, has the schus to go Shabbos night, to daven at the Kosel, especially Friday night. You go to the Kosel Friday night. Now let's say, if there's one thing you could count on when you go to the Kosel Friday night, what is it? What is it? You are going to get shoved, jabbed, pushed, moved, and everything else. Right? Let's say, if you were standing in shul, right, and you're in the middle of Shemona Esrei, and somebody were essentially like to check you, as if they were playing hockey with you, right? Somebody were to, right, push, right, check you, right? You wouldn't be, shkayach, right? Good Shabbos, right? It's not, let's say you'd be pretty annoyed, and by the way, understandably so. Understandably, come on, what's the matter with you? Like, watch where you're going. And yet again, I will say something interesting. It's almost like when you daven by the kosel, it's almost as if what you do is, I think it's even subconscious, you like relax your body a little bit so that you're like a little bit like more like Gumby-ish, like you're like a little bit more malleable, right? Say pushed over here, pushed over there, right? I'm a little more flexible so that I can almost like move with the waves of the people. Why is it so easy for me to do that there and yet so difficult for me to do that elsewhere? And the answer is because I'm back where I'm supposed to be. Yerushalayim is where we're supposed to be. Yerushalayim is the source of everything. Yerushalayim is where it all began, not just for Klal Yisrael, but where it all began for all of humanity. Yerushalayim is the place from where we were created. And therefore, again, I will say for many of us, the only place where we experience true life tranquility is in Yerushalayim, because that's home. That's the beginning. That's the source. So I'll say, so do we celebrate on this Yom Yerushalayim? Again, like I always say with these days, however you want to celebrate it, that's between you and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But just understand what we are celebrating. What we're celebrating is that 57 years ago, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us the schos to once again assert our rightful ownership over the source, the cradle of humanity, the source of everything in this world, the source of Kedusha, the source of life, the source of the very dirt and earth which we were created from. All of that comes from our holiest of cities. So I will say, we should make sure to say, Hodu Hashem ki tov ki le'olam chasdo. Because when you're reunited with your source, there's a certain power, there's a certain energy, and yes, I would say there's a certain tranquility that comes as a result of that. We are a different people now that we have Yerushalayim. We are a different nation now that we have Yerushalayim. And I must say, we know that deep down this current war in which we are in, you hear the stories. Hear the stories that when the soldiers have to go house to house in these towns and in these villages and in Gaza, right? They say, hanging on every single wall is a picture of Al-Aqsa, is a picture of Yerushalayim. This is not a war over Gaza, and this is not a war over Rafah. This, at the end of the day, this is a war like every other war over Yerushalayim. Because I will say what the war is always about is Yerushalayim. Because at the end of the day, what everyone wants is to control that beginning, is to control that source, is to control that place from which mankind was created, because the world recognizes the power and the energy that is contained in that place. And we are Zocha, that the Ribono Shel Olam gave it to us. He gave it to us thousands of years ago. He re-gave it to us 57 years ago. And we should be Zocha Mirz Hashem, to be proper guardians, to treat it with respect, to treat it with Kedusha, to build it up to the best of our ability, and most of all, we should be Zocha Mirz Hashem, to see the source rebuilt into what it truly could be. the home of our third Beis HaMikdash, the home of Klal Yisrael. May we zocha Meretz Hashem to come together with our families, with our friends, for Aliyah Beregel. May we zocha Meretz Hashem to bask in the beautiful glory of our third Beis HaMikdash with the Mashiach, with Tchias HaMesim, Mehir Rabbi Yameinu. Amen.